Hello, everybody. It's so good to see you today. I'm super excited for today's Khora Conversations, our live webinar that we have once a month. I'm Yuli Lee, and I'm with Khora Collective, and I'm super excited that you're all here with us and to meet our guest, who I will introduce very soon. But like I said, once a month we go live with incredible guests to unpack real leadership lessons. And these are insights, challenges, and breakthroughs that our guests have experienced and that they want to share with us so that we can also learn and grow how to become better leaders and healthier leaders in the spaces in which we lead. And at Khora Collective, our vision is to create a kingdom culture of leadership that is both generous and spacious for all Asian American Christian ministry and marketplace leaders across all generations. So we have a huge umbrella, and our live webinars are a really unique way to invite voices who you really need to get to know and hear from and who have lived experiences and leadership lessons that can help us to think differently, grow intentionally, and also help us lead with greater impact. And to help us do that today, we have Adrian Pay. He is the founder and CEO of the Change Navigation Company, which you can find at www.changenavigation.co. And we'll share that again later. But his company provides customized training, consulting, and development to organizations and leaders. Previously, he worked in organizational development for two of the largest companies in the world, leading a human resources department and also facilitating transformation in areas such as performance management and core values. He's an author of multiple books, and Adrian earned his degrees from Stanford University and also Fuller Seminary. He lives in Southern California with his family, and he loves finding new restaurants and recipes to cook, loves listening to music and playing video and board games with his friends and family. Welcome, Adrian.
Thanks so much, Yuli, and thank you to everyone who took the time out of the day to be here. And I'm just grateful to be here. I love Cora's mission, and it's an honor to be hosted, especially by you, Yuli, because I see you as a real thought leader in change, leadership, organizations, and so just really grateful. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I look forward to learning so much from you, and I know our audience members do as well. But before we dig in, I would love to know, tell us a little bit about some music that you're into these days, or maybe like a favorite video or board game that you're playing with your family.
Yeah. So, well, as far as it's kind of a mix of the old and the new, I guess. So for like just recently, I was actually playing with my wife Super Mario Brothers 3. So kind of a blast from the past, but I don't know, we kind of missed those days, and so we were playing a little of that. Board game. One of our favorites is actually the board game Pandemic. So it's kind of funny because
Oh,
it's like, yeah, when I say people that I love Pandemic, it can be, I don't want to misconstrue it as like I don't love the pandemic, but I love playing Pandemic. It's a board game. It's a cooperative board game. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it kind
no,
of
I haven't.
involves, yeah, it kind of involves like like outbreaks that happen around the world. I just sound so bad right now, but basically, it's about how to kind of eliminate the outbreaks, and you have different roles and stuff like that, and so it's kind of fun, and we really enjoy it. So yeah, that's kind of the kind of thing we're into right now.
Oh, that's so fun. I love that you're into playing Super Mario Brothers. I remember playing that with my entire family as well, and it's just such a fun
Oh,
time. Yeah,
yeah. Do you figure out all the secrets, like where everything is, and
we tried. We tried our best, but I'm one of those players like that dies instantly.
I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many hours I probably spent on the same level over and over again, right? Just like muscle memory now. I go back and I remember every single hidden block or whatever. But I was like, how many hours of my childhood did I spend doing this?
Wow, that's impressive.
I don't
Love
know. It's
it.
kind of, I don't know, maybe too much time, but yeah.
hey, you know what? I think leadership is about fun as well. So I love that you and your wife play a game together, video games or board games, and that you bring that into your marriage. I think that's so cool. As a leader, um, I love that about your leadership in particular. And I remember, speaking of the pandemic and the game, but also current day, and as we're still in some ways trying to dig ourselves out of the pandemic, um, in an offline conversation you and I had, you mentioned that you are becoming increasingly concerned about the toll that's exacted on anyone who steps up to take on leadership or responsibility in our current times. And as we all know, today's webinar is having the courage to lead in anxious times. And so I would love for you to tell us how you're assessing our current times and why it's important for leaders to be equipped for such a time as this.
Yeah, and really great transition, by the way, from pandemic the board game into so very well done. Yeah, I think that there's no doubt that we're living in anxious times. I mean, I think there's a lot of uncertainty and fear in the air, and jobs, industries, automation, AI, the future, the uncertainty. Um, and I think you're right that, like COVID certainly didn't help in terms of just the unknown. And I think there was a lot of losses for people that are still kind of unprocessed or unresolved from that time. Obviously there's the typical, I mean, not the typical, but the obvious deaths, that people lost people or not getting to say goodbye to people they loved, social isolation, loss of kind of leisure or relief from the stresses and burdens of life, like having to cancel vacations or trips, even on that level. So I think that didn't help. But I think that, you look at a lot of just other issues and you see surveys and statistics that show that, polarization is also at historic highs. Trust in institutions is at historic lows. I see also a lot of turnover too. And I've just been noticing from schools to church to medical jobs, and people are really struggling to dialogue with each other, do it in a respectful way. So I look at all that, and I just think there's a high level of societal anxiety. That's kind of the way I see it. And I think many of us kind of just feel it in the air. And I do think that leaders are kind of caught in the firestorm a bit, and they need to be equipped to understand this frustration and kind of how to handle it, without like drowning in it or losing themselves completely. So I think it's just important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you in your observations, and especially of loss and just how loss has taken so many different forms for us.
Yeah.
Just every day, and how we hold loss with joy together a lot more now than before, or maybe it's just something that we feel a lot more now than before because of current events, forcing us or kind of bringing things up emotionally that we
Yeah.
haven't necessarily had to think, feel, nor process prior to. So I agree with that so much. And also the polarization piece,
Mhm.
that's so real. And, it's almost, um, it's almost just very difficult to have a normal conversation with somebody
Yeah. Yeah.
because you never know what's gonna trigger somebody or kind of offend someone. And I feel like now, even a word that was normal, quote unquote normal,
Yeah.
5, 10 years ago is no longer that. Just any
Yeah.
word has taken on so many different meanings for people.
Right.
And it's, navigating, what is language now
Yeah.
that is helpful for people.
Totally. I totally see that too. It's just, yeah, like, yeah. And I remember talking to somebody about that and just saying like everything, yeah, just simple words, just take on new meaning and have layers to it. And so then it's like, it feels charged, and kind of like, what do you do with that? And how do you navigate that? It just feels challenging to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And I know you work with a lot of organizations through your company that you lead, and a lot of leaders, both in ministry and in the marketplace. And I'm curious to learn, what are some of the top leadership gaps that you're seeing, maybe skills or posture or character related, anything that you want to help illuminate here for us that you're seeing through the work you're doing with these companies and leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one that I see, which is pretty similar to what we were talking about before in the culture, but it is the ability to have, or the inability to have hard but important conversations.
Mhm.
And I think, especially to have those conversations with both truth and graciousness. It could be holding someone accountable for their job performance, addressing tension in a relationship dynamic. I think this is a challenge that has existed in every company I've ever worked for or with, and so I think that it's just a very universal human thing. Maybe you've seen it as well. And it's led me to kind of almost believe that like most of the world is probably conflict averse in one way or another. So I'm not saying that like, I think it's very normal. And I think it's also really my background as well, being conflict averse. And so having to learn and grow through that and kind of face hard things. And so I think that's really the first thing that I see. And then the second thing that I kind of see in terms of a gap is that I don't think people are just not getting enough support for themselves. Um, I think we underestimate how hard things can be, or life just comes at us kind of harder or faster than we can know, and so we burn out. And I think people, especially people who gravitate towards positions of like responsibility and leadership, I think we're often kind of hardwired to push ourselves to the limit, anyways. And then we give more than we allow ourselves to take in. And so then you add what we are talking about earlier, like that we live in this extra hard time with anxiety and stress and expectations and pressure so high. It's like by that math, I think leaders would probably need even more support than usual. But how much of us are really getting that? And so I don't see it being enough. And that's kind of why I am passionate about kind of the work that I'm trying to do, just to really help leaders get more support and good support in the ways that really help. So
Yeah, that's so good. I'm curious to learn more about your background in conflict averseness. Is that even a word? I
yes,
don't. Okay.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
how how did you come to realize, I guess, that that is something you need to grow in, and how
yeah.
have you navigated that yourself as a leader?
That's a great question. I have a memory of in my young adult years where I was on one of my work teams, and I remember that there was a conflict or a tension that I felt towards a different coworker, and I remember I kind of just like couldn't have a direct conversation, and so I remember literally going to a different room in the house and just kind of like talking to another person and just kind of like hiding. And that person, it was obvious that we needed to talk, but I just remember feeling like I just felt so scared to have that conversation. And I don't know if that was the moment that I realized that it was something I needed to work on. But I think that I had a team and mentors in my life who were just, they could see it, but they were so gracious and loving that they didn't shame me. And they really said, they tried and they kind of helped me to learn and grow and modeled it and challenged me. And I think through that, I just slowly grew in being able to do it. And so, numbers of years later, I would have that conversation, but I would have to prepare for the conversation with like notes. I'd be kind of like, getting ready for a hard conversation. I would prepare all these notes and things like that. And I remember some specific conversations like that. And then, I think just over time, now I'm at the point where I'm much more comfortable with it. I don't need to prepare notes. I deeply believe in the importance of having those conversations because even though it's hard, I see the good that comes out of it later. So I just trust it now. And so that's why I believe so deeply in this process of kind of like um, growing through hard conversations and feedback, because I just feel like I'm an example of somebody who really wasn't good at it and I was able to get better at it. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing your journey. And I love that you mentioned growing through feedback, because we're going to dig into your book a little bit later, but feel free to, integrate it into any answer that you want to share with us. But I wanted to show people
Thanks.
your book, The Art of Growing Through Feedback. Hopefully that's clear. It's coming up a little bit blurry for me. But yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's really really oh, here we go, quick read, and very practical, which I loved. I was sharing with Adrian that I shared the book with my team, and people purchased it, and we practiced some of his tips today. Like a teammate called me today to say, "Hey, I'm practicing Adrian's tips. Here's some feedback for you." And I responded by saying, "Thank you so much. Love to grow through your feedback." So it's helping me and my team. So I highly encourage anybody to purchase this book. We'll share more about it later as well.
Thanks so much.
Um,
I really appreciate that. That's so funny. That story. Yeah, sometimes I kind of feel funny because it's kind of like, well, I mean, in some ways it's good for me that I wrote this because now I have to like try to be good at this, like I was like, I remember talking to a friend a while back and I was kind of like, how do I provide this kind of feedback? And they're like, didn't you write something about this? Like, shouldn't you? And so I was like, oh yeah, I probably need to like be better at this. And so like it holds me to a certain standard, which is probably a good thing. But I
yeah.
hope that was turned out to be a good conversation with you and
Oh my
your,
gosh, it was
yeah.
so good.
Okay,
It
okay,
was
good.
so good and so productive that we kept going on.
Can I
Got
give
some
you some
more
feedback?
feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So funny.
But I loved our conversation because
Mhm,
I think we both grew a little bit today in a spirit of really loving feedback,
mm,
because we were trusted teammates, and the way that we gave feedback to each other was very loving,
mhm,
and productive at the same time. And like you said, when you find that support
mhm,
around you as a leader to have honest conversations with you, um, it's life changing, and then it
mhm,
helps you grow to appreciate and love the thing that used to be really challenging. Um,
mm.
and
Well
so,
said.
yeah, so thank you for writing this book. I look forward to continue applying it into my leadership. But going back to this idea of gaps, leadership
Yeah.
gaps. I'm curious to learn from you if you've seen any gaps that differ
Mm.
between marketplace versus ministry contexts, and
Yeah.
what that looks like for you, or maybe there's different nuances there.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the one about having hard conversations, I think that is definitely in both ministry and marketplace, because it's just human, as we talked about. I think in ministry contexts, one of the things, there's some specific challenges that I have kind of seen. I don't know exactly how to describe this, but it's kind of like there's a challenge with when you work in ministry contexts, there's often kind of like this. It's challenging to hold people accountable in a specific way, especially when they're kind of volunteers or they don't have a typical paycheck. I think, like lay volunteers at a large church or people who fundraise for their salaries and that kind of thing. I think when you have that hard conversation with them, like, so you need to hold them accountable, it's a little challenging because you kind of know they might be thinking, well, I don't have to do this anyway. Like how do you keep them motivated? I think that's kind of a very specific challenge of kind of in more nonprofit or ministry environments that I've seen. And I think it requires a lot of people and leadership skills, but to like motivate people without the paycheck. But I think if you get good at it, I think you become a very powerful mobilizer because working with volunteers is such an incredible skill to have. So that's one. Another one that I see is kind of like in the ministry world is kind of this I don't know if it's an inability, but a challenge in saying no. So like one thing that I've seen a lot is kind of like when a leader kind of says, "What do you all think? Like, what are your ideas?" And then like five different people come up with five different ideas, and then the leader feels bad for saying no to any of them, and so they end up doing all the ideas. And so it can be almost a sense of kind of like I want people to feel like they're important and having a voice, which is good, but then kind of like it opens up to so many the process of decisions to too many people almost, and there's not enough parameters or clarity on how a decision will be made. And so I think it can lead to kind of confusion or unrealistic expectations, sometimes burnout because you start doing all the projects. So it's kind of that's kind of an interesting challenge to have. So I kind of like, when I work with organizations like that, I even kind of like say we have to limit the number of priorities in the plan, the strategic plan. Like, and we need to have honest conversations about how to make these action steps as realistic as possible because you can't do it all. So I think that's kind of a little bit what I see in the ministry world. Um,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so good. Why do you think ministry leaders have a hard time saying no?
that's a great question. I mean, is it, what do you think? Is it kind of like feeling like you have to be nice? Is it kind of like, I don't know. I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know precisely, but I think niceness has to do with it. Um, I wonder if saying no in the ministry world, some ministry leaders equate that to like unfaithfulness. You know, like these
Mm,
like Christian sort of terms that we have
mm.
that we where we over spiritualize certain things,
Yeah,
um,
totally.
and we equate them when the equation is doesn't even work.
Yeah,
Or
right,
like doesn't
right.
make sense. So I wonder if no sometimes makes us feel like, oh, we're not doing like everything God might want us to do or something like that.
That's really
And then
interesting.
we
Yeah,
see or um I don't know, like God's plan is bigger than the strategy. So then we end up
that's
doing
really
like a
interesting.
thousand more things or whatever.
That could
Those
be,
are some
yeah.
mind immediately, but yeah.
That's a great
But
idea. And yeah. And I think also like kind of like the other thing that comes to mind is kind of like maybe like again this feeling of like wanting to honor and value everybody, which I think again is a great thing, but kind of like it doesn't have to be in direct conflict with having clarity in processes, and just being really upfront with people and just saying we're not going to be able to do everything, but we will, like so it's like but we will listen to and we'll prioritize. And this is how we're going to make the decision, things like that, and to really involve people in it and without shutting them down. Maybe I don't know.
mhm. Yeah. No, I think the ministry world could use more of that. Clear processes, priorities, um, and when we're gonna get things done, by when, by at what time, etc. I think that clarity is often lacking under the guise of um, God will accomplish this, in His timing,
Right.
etc.
Yeah.
And so I do think ministry and marketplace can learn from each other in a
Yeah.
lot of ways that are healthy. It can make each side healthier.
Yeah, yeah, and I think speaking to the marketplace side, like I think that some of the challenges there, like because like we're talking about kind of like when you can't say no, then you do everything, which kind of can lead to that burnout situation where people do too much and then don't get enough support. And I think that like in the marketplace, there's kind of like one of the challenges that I see maybe there would be that there's less of a kind of automatic value of investing in people. Like there can be more of a tendency towards pragmatism, kind of like, okay, if we put on this leadership or this diversity program, what will it give or get us? What's the ROI, the business case, the competitive advantage? That's the big talk, right? And I think that not that those things aren't important, but you have a less of the sense that in the ministry world where it's kind of like this investment in people has worth in itself, and like, oh, we need to make sure that people are cared for and that they're really living healthy lives. And so I think that could lead to fewer people getting support they need. So like I think that's where the marketplace could learn from ministry sometimes.
Yeah, that's so good. I totally agree. Um, awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna transition us into the solutions or maybe possible solutions for some of these gaps that we've talked about and challenges that we see in both ministry and marketplace and also in our world. And I would love to learn from you how you're helping organizations and leaders better exist in today's world. What should we be working on regarding perhaps communication skills, perhaps in the ways in which we develop our support systems around us? What does that look like practically?
Yeah, yeah. And you really hit the nail on the head, which is that really developing that support system is so critical. I think because I think let me think about like what's the right kind of support that leaders need. I think it is about relationships, like because books and podcasts can only do so much, right? And people are so inundated these days with data and information. I think we just need real people and connections. And it's not, like also sometimes you have say celebrity influencers who provide all of life's answers through internet videos. That's not, people need someone who will come alongside them, I think, and listen to them, not just dispense, and kind of someone who can understand some people who have been through pain and struggle, people who can understand complex challenges, because I think we're living in, there's a lot of complexity going on. And I guess in some ways, kind of like why I wanted to do the work that I'm doing is that I really see myself as kind of like a thought partner to people in that way. It's kind of like I want to come alongside them, listen to them, really try to someone who has been through some complex things and some challenging things, and really just be a partner to them. So I think that like there's a listening part to it. I think there is a role where I think one thing I try to do is provide frameworks, to stimulate people's thinking, to help them understand, okay, where does anxiety come from? Help them strategize, as you said, like how do you actually build a strategic support system that will work for you? What do the different people who are out there, like the categories of people, whether it's coaches, mentors, counselors, what do they provide? What are they good at doing? How do you get the most out of a service? Things like that. Those are kind of the topics where I do have ideas and kind of questions specifically address and kind of help people, kind of work through the challenges that we've been talking about. So I think, there is kind of like, so for me, like, I think that like, there's a place for kind of like the one-on-one setting, like say it's a coaching thing where whether it's me or somebody else, people can kind of take the conversation anywhere they need. I think that would be a place where they can get listened to, supported. There's a role, I know Khora has some cohorts, like the cohort kind of format where like there's small groups, and like I have cohorts as well where people can learn and process alongside other people, which I think sometimes that can be helpful because they can share resources and ideas with each other, grow in those relationships. Fulfills a longing for community as well that I think people have. And then sometimes I do take on some consulting projects where, it's kind of working with organizations or churches or whatever, kind of towards greater health. And that's kind of more of a strategic, kind of a combination of strategic and relational things. And so, but I think everything to me, it's all about really personal, relational, customized, based on listening, serving, and genuine care for people. I think that's what people need.
Yeah, I totally agree with you in terms of relationships and just finding the right people um, who can speak into your life. And they don't have to be I think, if you have a best friend, awesome. But if you don't, you know, you'd be surprised by who's already around you, that you might be able to ask, to kind of come into your support circle. And along those lines, like, what advice would you give to people who might say, well, I don't really know anybody, where do I find these people? Where can people start to look for others who can sort of be the foundation for their support system?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you kind of gave an answer already a little bit about kind of like looking ready where you are. But I think, I think what people are lacking is really kind of like above them, so to speak, like people who pour into them, and then kind of peers. And they kind of, but they're giving way more in terms of people who are they're mentoring or serving, and they're kind of, so I would say that like for peers, it's like the friends, the friends and colleagues kind of connection point. So, if you're looking for peers and they play a specific role, there's definitely like, you know, um, your current or previous work settings and like school. And so, I mean, for me, like, I guess one thing I would say is that like I felt pretty isolated, during COVID and afterwards. I think like a lot of people did. And I realized that as you get older, like there's not a lot of things that are set up for you in the same way anymore. Like, you're in college and everything kind of gets set up for you in some ways. The meetings are there. You don't have to plan them yourself all the time. And I think just life gets busy with families and work and everything and stress. And it's like we kind of stop if we're not intentional, like, and we don't invest in keeping those friendships up, it just really kind of can fall off. And I realized that I just had to kind of like go back to those relationships and just kind of like reach out and say, hey, do you want to talk? And so I think that that was a big part of it, just like one by one, just really reconnecting with people who from the past who I used to be close with or who I had connections with. One thing that I also kind of found really helpful was to kind of set up regular times with people where I would kind of just be like, instead of just initiating every time, I would be like, let's set up a call every month. Or I have a group of people who and I have a group of friends who we talk once a month. And that way we don't have to like, initiate or figure out who's initiating next and things like that. And just kind of like have that support system. And then like for above us, like I think mentors, coaches, and counselors, I think there's a lot of ways to do that. And I actually have specific things written about that and whatnot, but and guides on how to do it. But I think that, like there's definitely ways to reach out to people who, depending on what you're looking for. But I think there's a lot of people out there who also want to give and want to help. So I think people who are older, wiser, and I mean, I think that like networks like Khora, for example, could also be great because like there's a lot of people here who are very experienced and wise kind of leaders, and so I don't know. I mean, like groups like Khora, I don't know. Not that you asked me to say that, you didn't. So I just think that like things like there's a lot of networks out there, right? So
yeah, I know. I think it's hard to ask people who are above us or who've gone before us. It's a little bit. It can feel a little bit intimidating sometimes to reach out, but you never know what their answer will be. And a no is not a no to you personally, perhaps. It's maybe it's just that they don't have time right now, and but I feel like every time I've been asked to mentor somebody, I've always seen it as an honor. But I've sometimes had to decline because I just could not take it on.
Yes.
Because my plate was too full.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it doesn't hurt to ask. You never know. I once asked a president of a university, thinking, this would be an interesting person to learn from. She's a female president, so those are rare. So I reached out and she immediately said yes, and I was shocked. Wow. I was literally shocked that she would give me time, and she said, "Call me every Tuesday." So kind of like what you said, setting it in the calendar. I think it's helpful for her because she was so busy. She said, "You have to call me every Tuesday at this certain time because that's the only time I have." And and then I never missed that time because it was so precious. But I tell people just reach out. You never know, and also to reach out to people who are different from you. Who are diverse, and people, leaders of color. I think are amazing Asian American leaders. I will say, as an Asian American female leader, I get the least amount of asks from Asian American men.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. I've asked other Asian American female leader friends if they've experienced something similar, and they have said yes. So it's just something that I find interesting. But I've been asked a lot by other men of color and white men to mentor them. So yeah, I think it's interesting. This is a fun
well, they're missing out.
I am curious. You talked about becoming more aware of your own anxiety, and obviously you're somebody who's experienced so much in the workplace and have worked on yourself to become a healthier leader. And so, can you share with us some of the lessons you've learned along the way as somebody who's been in both ministry and marketplace, which I think is so rare and also thrilling for me as one of the leaders of Khora, where we focus on ministry and marketplace. And since you've been in both contexts, what leadership lessons do you have that have helped you become a healthier leader?
Yeah, I think first of all, in my experience, I've actually kind of found it helpful to be in both ministry and marketplace contexts at the same time. I know it's not always possible, but I think that the reason why is because I found that when spend too much time in one group or context, it almost can become my world and it's harder to see outside of it. Like I remember seeing almost the exact same issues in a corporate organization as in a church I was working with at one time. And I was like, wow, it really opened my eyes to see some of the patterns that are going on more broadly in society. And I do think that people are people. no matter the content or context of the work, and we bring ourselves and our issues wherever we go. So I think that's the first thing I would say in terms of that. But as far as like becoming a healthier leader, to me, I think health is all about, we talked about this, but like recognizing and addressing, those kind of losses and griefs, the things that are unresolved in our lives. Because I believe the unresolved issues in people lead to most problems in the world at the end of the day. So one of my metrics, as funny as it might sound, is to be honest about like which relationships in my life have significant unresolved issues. Like I do an audit, I kind of go like, and I slowly seek to kind of face and work through them. So if there's tensions or conflicts I need to work through with a colleague, a family member, a friend, that kind of thing. So, and sometimes it could be from a long time ago. It could be like 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And I'm like, I don't really believe it's ever too late in that way. And at times I go back and resolve issues that were many years ago, and I try my best to. And it's hard to do it, but I feel like it's worth it in the end. And then I think on a personal level, for me, health is about facing things inside of myself that are unresolved. Like, I don't know if it's unmet hopes and expectations, losses, wounds, that kind of thing. And I think when we don't address that, it leads to problems. Like I think of someone like Tiger Woods and kind of all the expectations he grew up because of his father's unresolved issues. I don't know if you know his story at all, but that kind of thing. Yeah. And I think doing that really requires the ability to face yourself and to face other people, kind of with courage and grace. And I think it's really hard to do, but I think like I said earlier, when I take the first step and I started to do it, I think like maybe it's like initiating a hard conversation or admitting an area of weakness, asking for help. I just felt that it felt right in some way. Like I began to trust the process, and like facing these truths and things about me that are really hard. Like it might be painful, but it brings health in the long run. And I really do believe this is where kind of the faith aspect of things really, God was working, where the whole truth will set you free, and love rejoices in the truth. Those verses really come alive for me in that process.
Yeah.
So
That's so inspiring, because I know so many of us struggle to take that first step, with a difficult relationship or unresolved issue, whether that's within us or something external. What would you say to those of us who struggle to take that first step? Like, what might be some barriers to doing that? And I don't know, what makes you so courageous to do it? Like, I'm so inspired by your ability to just say, I'm going to do this.
well, I think like I really do believe the key is kind of like grace and faith, so to speak. That's why I believe in God, is because and it's the base of that is grace. The idea that we need something outside of ourselves. So the fact that I was able to do that, I solely attribute to people and God who helped me, who showed me the way, who kind of loved me first, and I don't think I could have done it without that. So I would say for those people, like total grace, have grace to understand that the barrier that you feel is there for a reason that probably comes from some painful part, or loss in their life. And to realize that, like, it's not like you should be, it's like it's a shame to blame yourself. It's like there's a place where we all have those. And I think, maybe who is the person or people in their lives who could be that source of grace for them, to help them really to show that love and support and that environment where that could unlock that ability to actually take that step. Because I think that you can't just will yourself to do it. I don't think you really can do that. I don't think that's how it works, in my opinion. Yeah.
That's so good. I think that brings us back to your encouragement for us to find that support circle. Having
Yeah.
those who are around us to help encourage us in that right direction.
Right.
Seems like it's going to be an important piece of the puzzle, for us to face ourselves with the community that's around
Yes.
us, and so the community can encourage us and affirm our decision to resolve some of those relational conflicts that might be hanging over our head.
Yeah, totally. And you're right. Like when you're in community like that really can help, right? That whole process, a good community, right? A healthy community. I think one thing that I also would say is that first step is hard, but I do think that once you've taken that step, in my experience at least, like it wasn't like every step after that was equally hard. all the time. I think that there can be a snowball effect where it's kind of like, because I really think that in some ways, like at a certain point, like I got to the point where it doesn't feel as much like work anymore. I know it sounds funny, but like there is a part of it that feels like freedom. Like
Mm,
there's kind of like that, like I don't have to be tied to this thing that I'm stuck, and that there's creativity to that. There's curiosity on some level. I mean, I think from an early age, I've always had this deep curiosity to understand people and the world better and myself. So I see myself as like not a project because that seems so dehumanizing, but it's like I just fascinated. I'm like, I want to know like what makes me go or where things get stalled. And like I just find it interesting. And I'm kind of like, if I can figure that out, like so many things can flow from that. Like I could have
mm,
peace in my life, I can have satisfying relationships, I can navigate the world with confidence. So it's like, to me, there's nothing more practical than that either. So it's really motivating as well. Like when I have an issue, I'm like, I kind of want to get after it. I kind of want to know what's at the root of it. So it can be energizing sometimes too, not just feel like
yeah,
a drudge, all the time. Or is that a word? I
yeah.
don't know. Drudgery, whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I think you pointed out something, a characteristic of a leader that I think is really important. One of many is curiosity.
Mm,
Um, I think curiosity, when I see that in a leader, it, like you said, kind of creates a snowball effect
mm,
in our lives in terms of growing, um, becoming healthier, all the things that could be good. Um, if we're going in that direction with our curiosity. And so, but I do think curiosity also keeps us humble because
mm.
there are things that surprise us as
Yes.
we become curious about certain things, and I think curiosity tests our assumptions, and also brings in divine appointments with people who we might have never had the chance to meet, without our curiosity. And so I totally think that having that posture of curiosity connected to this idea of becoming a healthier leader can be super important and really, really helpful, um,
Yeah.
because it brings in wonder as well,
Mm,
and helps our imagination sort of expand at the same time, which I think is
mm.
really, really cool. And speaking of imagination, I'm curious if you could paint a picture for us of a healthy leader. Like if you could just describe a healthy leader, how would you describe this person?
I mean, I think that yeah, I don't know if I don't know. I hope I'll do this justice, but I think I see a person who is surrounded by people who are pouring into them, and people who. So it's a balance between people pouring into them, kind of their peers. They have a good network of peers, and people that they're giving to as well. So it feels like a real give and take dynamic. It's somebody who is not perfect at all. Like I don't think that at all. I think it's a person who is trying, who is making mistakes, but is surrounded by so much support, by people pouring into them and so much grace that they can kind of, they can absorb that, they can learn from that, they can see it in a positive way, they can keep going, things like that. And all that stuff really unlocks their ability to really be consistently, facing the things inside themselves, the things in their relationships, and kind of really not leaving that unresolved. Because I think that, like, as we talked about earlier with like society right now and like and COVID and all those things, like there's all these unprocessed and unresolved losses that people have. And we can resolve those, we can try to resolve those in ways that aren't helpful. Like we sometimes people are like they'll go a different direction with it. They'll blame people or things, or they'll um just look to like larger than life celebrities who think they'll provide all their answers, like. But I think that like a healthy leader is somebody who is, really in that kind of community context is really um facing themselves and facing these relationship gaps and kind of really seeking to resolve them, as best they can. But and they're just kind of a work in progress. I don't know. I don't know if that's yeah, but
No, I love it. I know that was a broad question. I talk to as well, but I think I love that you bring us back to community over and
Mhm.
over again. I also think that's very Asian American
Mm,
of us as well to um, value community and to discern in community, to act from community, grow in community. Um, and there's so much value in that, and especially as so many of us struggle with isolation. I remember moving to California, just 2.5 years ago.
Mm,
And I think it was probably the first time in my life where I said out loud, I was sitting alone in my living room, and I said out loud to God, I really feel lonely. And I
mm,
was shocked that those words came out of my mouth because
mm,
I probably, struggled with loneliness here and there in the past, but I had never felt so alone
mm,
after moving from Chicago to California and not
mm,
really having any deep connections out here. And so
mm.
it's a really devastating feeling to feel like you're alone, even though I knew I wasn't, like God was with me, but
Yeah,
just not really having anywhere, that I was plugged into.
yeah,
And, my husband was traveling a lot for work. And I think my little dog Cubby became my community.
yeah.
We just became closer and closer to each other
Yeah,
until we found a church. But
yeah.
yeah, it's hard being a leader, and leaders often are lonely, you
Yes.
know? So yeah,
But
I love your call to community.
yeah, and I think that like your level of awareness and honesty to say that, that I feel
Mhm.
lonely. I mean, a lot of people like it's hard to get to that point. So I think that was, I mean, when I hear that, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of vulnerability and awareness to be able to even to know that. And that's kind of what I think is the key of a healthy leader is to really be that in touch with yourself, that you can see that, and then you know where you need to get and whatnot. And so, but that's, yeah, so that's, it's challenging, but that's kind of the sign. I think that's a sign of a healthy leader, what you did.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I do think becoming healthy, part of that process includes a lot of healing, like you mentioned, like processing those things that are unresolved. And
Mhm.
in order to heal, I feel like we have to name things out loud.
Mm, yes.
And because we need some kind of starting point, and so I think it's okay if your starting point is a little bit off, like if you're not unprocessed yet in all of your feelings. But if
Yeah.
you just start talking, just, even
Yeah.
just to God, like I did, um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that could be a small little step that we take as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, to follow your directions and taking a small
Mm.
faithful step forward. I really like that a lot. Um, Earlier you shared about some frameworks that you have for people, some processes that you share when you coach leaders. I'm curious if you can share, take us even more practical, maybe, and share anything around those lines, for our listeners. Like, what can our listeners implement tomorrow, for example, um, after listening to this webinar? Maybe it could be from something from your book,
Yeah.
if you want to go in that direction, or just anything that you find is meaningful for readers.
Yeah. Um, Well, I think the the two gaps that I mentioned were people aren't getting enough support. So I think you know um, like as far as like I think what someone can do even right now is just get a sheet of paper and just kind of do a relationship kind of like audit, kind of just like how many people are above me, how many people are a peer, and how many people am I serving, and just see like where are there any gaps anywhere, and I think that then kind of understanding what do I need, right?
Mhm.
And I think that like if anybody has any needs ideas, like I'm happy. You can actually sign up with a call with me free, and I'd be happy to talk them through some of the frameworks and stuff like that to help them find the best support systems for them, whether it's
Nice.
mentor, coach, counselor, communities, whatever it is. So I have kind of ideas about how to more specifically diagnose and whatnot, and what each can do in your life. And so that's something that is a practical offer there. The second gap I mentioned was having those hard conversations. So getting better at the conversations. I think, I mean, I did the book, the you mentioned the art of growing through feedback. It was meant to be practical, in that way. And so it's that's something that could be picked up pretty easily. And I think um, When it comes to that, I feel like for what I would say about feedback real quick, because I know it's a big topic, I
Yeah.
think that really, I don't want to oversimplify and just say like tomorrow you'll become great at this or that, or but I think that there's three components to growth that I see. One of them is just a psychological component. So kind of like, for example, why are we conflict averse? Right. I think the answer often has roots that go back in our child upbringing, some of our needs and fears. So that's one component that I address in the book. Then there's kind of like growth involves action and practice. So we do have to exercise kind of muscles to grow, right, and be strong. And so I think people need tools, to know it's doable. And I think that's where the practical steps in the book, kind of like the examples and exercises, can come in. And I think also like a book feels more doable if it's readable. And so I know it's funny, but I intentionally wrote the book to be most chapters only a few pages long. So it's just like there's enough barriers to reading books in the first place. So I'm like, let's just make it so that it can be as readable as possible. And then I think growth finally happens through relationships that we've been talking about. And so I did write the book, design it specifically, and field tested discussion questions at the end of each chapter so that people could actually have conversations. And so I don't know if that's what your teammate or your colleague did, but there's an element where it just takes on another level, like when you do it with a person, whether it's like your team or small group. Okay, we need 15 minutes to kick off our meeting, so let's just start with a couple questions here. Or you want to get to know a friend a little bit better, so you're like, hey, like I have some questions here, just want to get to know, like, how did you grew up, dealing with, what did you learn about feedback growing up, just like deepen the relationship. I think if you go from reading a book individually to kind of like doing it relationally, like I think that just catapults it. So like somebody could literally take one of the questions in the book, or that question right there, like how did you grow up in your family or culture, learning about feedback? Just ask that question to a good friend tomorrow, and just like start the conversation. So those are a couple of things, but I don't know. Those are a couple just ideas, but yeah.
No, those are great ideas. I love that question. I've never asked that question before to anybody.
Hmm.
But I will ask that to my friends now and see what I learn, because yeah, like what you mentioned in the first part of your book is understanding how um, your past might have influenced the ways in which you give or receive feedback. I think is so important, just understanding our own story, um, and how we became the way we are in terms of our reactions. I think is critical to becoming that self-aware leader that we've been talking about this whole time. And one of the pieces, one of the many things I love about your book is you mention these tips and give us insights on giving feedback cross culturally,
Mhm.
which I loved. And I would love for you to share with our audience, like, what should our Asian American audience know about feedback in particular?
I think to understand that feedback, there is contextualization to feedback. So it's like, but I think that sometimes we kind of have stereotypes about words and about concepts. So I think that we think like, oh, feedback is all people are thinking always about direct, and I think that like what I've learned through communication is that like we often there's value in both direct and indirect forms of
Mhm.
communication. And I think the best communicators can actually mix and match them in different times, in different ways. You know what I mean? And I'm so interested. This is a great topic we could talk about for hours. I'm really interested in that kind of
Yeah.
topic. But I think that like to understand that like when you think about feedback, don't assume that it's just like, well, that's something that is a Western thing, or like, I can't have I think having a direct conversation with somebody is can be done in many different ways. So like the way you do the conversation doesn't have to be in your face to be direct, but face to face with somebody is the key, like where it's not like circuitous or talking around somebody or behind somebody, but the way you do it doesn't have to be in your face. And I think that's the part where I think, Asians, I think actually probably have a lot of skill in that area, like of learning how to like be, gentle or like gracious or like very, just very, I don't know, very culturally savvy. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of things that Asians could bring to the table in that area. So,
I totally agree. I think we have this great spidey sense, is what I call
mm,
it,
hmm,
the ability
yeah,
to discern beyond words themselves,
mm, yes,
and to really read those spatial cues
Yeah.
when we're in a relationship with somebody or in a certain context. I think Asian American leaders have that savvy, like you said, and I think we should use it more. And we have a different way of speaking sometimes. Not, this is a broad generalization. So, but I think those are all advantages of our leadership and the value that we bring as
Mm.
Asian American leaders. And so I
Yeah.
completely agree with you on that. As we're kind of closing in on the hour already, I can't believe it. I could talk to you for hours and hours on end, but we
Me
just
too.
have 4 minutes left, and I would love for you to share one leadership lesson um, that you have always wanted to share with your younger self. What would that leadership lesson be?
I think it's to embrace patience and kind of even pain in my journey, because I think the shortest path isn't necessarily the best one. And I think that my younger self was probably thinking and would be tempted to think that I need to fast track my way to more wisdom and maturity. But some of the most important lessons in my life, when I think about it, have actually taken the longest time for me to learn. And in some ways, I wonder if those lessons actually planted deeper roots than if I tried to learn them in only 6 months or a year. And so I think that like taking longer isn't always a bad thing. In fact, it can be a better thing sometimes.
Mm.
And then I think the pain part of it, like I think plenty of people have skill, but not necessarily maturity or character. And to me, there's no shortcut to those. And I think that they really are developed through patience and pain. So that's probably what I would tell myself, something like that.
Yeah, I do agree. I think that character, uh, it just takes forever. It's a lifelong journey. Um, and sometimes we have to, I was telling somebody else that sometimes we have to um, go into fermentation mode
I like that one.
and just stay there and
Mm,
marinate and ferment for a while.
like
Um,
kimchi.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes like kimchi, it's in hiddenness and in
Yeah.
darkness um, that that it becomes the tastiest. And so,
Mm,
yeah, I love that leadership lesson to be patient. I agree. Impatience is one of the things I'm working on as a leader.
mm,
I think and you would know this too, but we have vision as leaders, and we want to just see things happen,
yeah.
and we want to move fast. Um, and but I'm learning to slow down. I think slow down and patience. Slowing down and patience is all part of being a spacious leader, is what we talk about a lot at
Mm,
Khora.
mm,
Um, and it's becoming more spacious within us internally because we're becoming more rooted in God, as you said. And also because of that, we become more spacious. We're able to create this like spaciousness for others to join us in that journey of abiding in Jesus and in the true vine. And so,
mm.
oh my gosh, I don't want to wrap this up, but we have 1 minute, and
Okay.
I wanted you to share with us if any of our guests want to find you, where can they find you? Where should they go on socials or your website? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I'm not really on social media that much, but you can go to my website. It's changenavigation.co, and you can sign up with a call with me. I mentioned, or if you're not ready to do that, it's totally fine. There's an assessment on the site you could take. It's kind of fun. Learn about yourself a bit more. You can sign up for my newsletter where I release new articles every month, pretty much. Yeah, and just I think if you ever see any connections for yourself or other people where you might need a coach to help you grow in leadership, communication, organizational skills, or looking for content or training for your team, church group, a consultant helps with diagnosis strategy and different dynamics, then just would love it if that I'm there if you need me. And so yeah.
Yes. Yes, everybody sign up with Adrian. I would also love to get any kind of coaching from you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be our guest today. I learned so much. I was incredibly blessed by this 1 hour of my day. It was such a gift. Um, and for any of you who just love these live webinars, I know there's so many of you out there. Our next one will take place Friday, November 21st, actually. I think that's next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to have Mimi Chan join us, and she's going to be sharing about leadership wisdom for next gen marketplace leaders. So if you're a next gen marketplace leader or you're an older leader, but you want to learn some stuff about next gen leaders, I highly recommend you join our live webinar next Friday. And until then, thanks again, Adrian, and we'll see you all again next time. Bye.
Thank you so much, Julie. I really appreciate it.